Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back, Championship Leadership Podcast. And today we got Randall Crowder. He's from Austin, Texas. Randall, thanks for being here, man.
Hook 'em. Well, I can't. I don't know if I can say hook 'em this time because it's like, when you're from Austin, you are like just a bitter UT fan. You're loyal as hell, but you're angry as hell because we can't seem to. Pardon my French. We can't seem to find a victory here. So we pull victory or defeat from the jaws of victory. It seems like every weekend, and to give Alabama the game of their lives and run them up on a backup quarterback only to lose by one is just painful.
Man, I was pulling for you guys so hard in that game. I was like, please beat Alabama.
And watch, we'll have some, 2-bit team take us, and just blow us out in the next couple of weeks. That's what we do. We play to our talent. And so I hope that, this is a learning experience for the kids, and I hope they take this and they grow from it, fingers crossed. So
it does feel like Texas you guys have been kind of just waiting for kind of a while now for Texas standards, right? Because you've had a lot of success. So it feels like it's been a minute since you've really kind of been there.
I swear someone needs to write maybe you should, because obviously we're on championship leadership, talking about that, and it's like, you always hear these anecdotes about leadership, and you always hear these anecdotes about culture, and it's always kind of hard to put your finger on it, but it's like I always tell people, it's one of those things, it when you see it. I can break down what I think a leader is, what I think a manager is. I think you having served as well, you kind of know the difference between someone who's kind of born to lead and someone who's just, kind of put in the position by rank. At UT, they have all the tools. They have all the money. They have all the talent. But for some reason, it doesn't come together. And somebody needs to really go in there and really study what is going on. And it was really depressing. For most diehard UT fans, we go back to 2005, right? So that was the Vince Young era. One of the greatest, college games of all time. I mean, what a remarkable performance. But a lot of people will go, what about 2010? It's like, okay, we went to the title game in 2010. And
is that Colt McCoy?
That was Colt McCoy getting taken out, very early on. And so, woulda, coulda, shoulda, right?
Yeah.
But it's interesting. They track back a tale of two programs. From that game, Alabama did this. And UT just did this. And they got punched in the mouth, bummer, and it just crippled the program. And they've had three number one, three kind of first round draft picks since then. That's 12 years, only three. Alabama's had 40 something. They've gone to the title game 10 times. They've won 6 titles. It's incredible. I think as a leader, understanding not only how do you respond to failure, but how do you rally, your troops, your soldiers, your people, your team, whatever. What do you do when you get punched in the mouth? How do you respond? Do you use it to fuel you and drive you forward? Or do you kind of keep going, well, once upon a time, we did this one thing and we were really good, and you kind of use it as an excuse? It's really, I don't know what, UT's got to figure it out, man. They don't have that hunger, that drive, that kind of, let's go get after it.
I mean, I think that it has to be that, right? I mean, because like you said, they got everything else. And before Nick Saban with Alabama, and I don't know how we got on this football tangent, but that's all right. I like football. Alabama was kind of going through that same period of struggle that Texas is right now. And overnight, basically, with the new coach, a new leadership in town. I mean, obviously, look at what they've done.
It's incredible. I always kind of try to, remember, look, I'm sitting on the sidelines. I'm the peanut gallery. And so, I don't want to be too hard on people. And then, they're this too, they're in the mud, right? So it's I try to be a little bit, hey, look, it's easy for me to, throw stones, but, I think for me, it's, I always hate to see not wasted potential, because I don't think they're wasting it, but when someone has such amazing potential, you just want to see them live into it, and it's there, and it's not about the coach, it's not about any one, kid. It's not about the system. It's all of those things. And it's all of those things coming together to support each other. And so I always talk about that with even when I think about my current role at Phunware, being a public company, so much of my responsibilities now is how do I train and resource the people underneath me? And, there's certain people who, I see it in them. I mean, they could, the sky's the limit. And, I don't think they see it in themselves. Right. And so it's like, how do I get that out of them? How do I, get them out of their comfort zone to see them how I see them? So, I think that's going to be something that UT is going to have to figure out over the next, hopefully this season, but, at least soon.
Yeah. I mean, one game you can't, and against probably the best team in the country. So,
yeah, for sure.
There's some moral victories there for sure. What's well, that kind of leads us into what I like to usually ask first is, what championship leadership is the name of the podcast. So, what's kind of your definition, or what does championship leadership mean to you when you hear that?
Yeah, I think it's funny. We were talking about before we started about, I'm not great at, the influencer engagement, social media space. And I've got some really, close friends like Dan Fleischman and Todd Armstrong who introduced us, kind of talking about that willingness to put yourself out there. And I think a lot of people talk about like, leaders often, more often than not, don't really ask to lead. They're usually kind of put in situations and they step up. I think we talked about this a little bit, like leadership versus manager. For me, like leadership is less of like a construct and more of just like this consistent commitment to conviction of action. And so I think, being a leader is, when you get, I think I always kind of couch it in terms of like motivation. Like you think about like motivation, like I'm going to watch a YouTube video, get real jacked up and I'm like, let's go do something. Well, motivation, those endorphins go away after a while. That adrenaline goes away after a while. When you're, on mile 20 of a ruck march, motivation is not going to get you there. And it's just really this conviction of action. And so when I see like leadership, like championship leadership, it's the one more crowd. Jordan talks about this, Kobe talks about this, elite athletes talk about this, because they're leaders, in their own right at a championship level, literally. And it's just that dogged, one more rep, one more step, one more thing. And like when other people around you see that, they're like, well, if they can do it, I can do it. You're inspiring others through your actions, not so much your words. The words are a part of it, right? But when it comes to like championship leadership, elite leadership, it's those things that, last man to step off the battlefield and last man to eat. Like your soldiers notice that. They see that and they see you still, practicing. And, some of these guys will work out before the workout, or they'll stay for a second or third workout after the workout. And then everybody else is looking at that going, dude, that's the captain. Like, man, if they're going to do it, I'm going to do it. And so like for me, that championship leadership is just showing people, follow me. Like, I'm not going to tell you to do something I'm not going to do. If it sucks, it's going to suck for me too. And it's just having that conviction to be consistent. It's not just on Mondays, I'm going to be real jacked up and fired up. But by like Wednesday, I'm kind of fading, and Friday, you're never going to find me. It's no, every day we're going to put in the work. And I think that to me just embodies that leadership. And it goes back to what we're talking about football. It's like setting that example of just, it's hard, but it's worth it.
Yeah. I love it, man. That's awesome. The one more, that reminds me, what, Ed Milet, you familiar with him? He's got the,
I know it.
That's the name of his new book, I think, is something to do with one more rep. And there's a lot of power to that for sure.
Absolutely. Andy Frisella, another good friend, has been somebody that we've seen a lot. I mean, they'll motivation and inspiration, right? They're just two amazing human beings who, really cut through a lot of the BS. I think there's a lot of, I wouldn't say, we don't have to get political, but the rough edges kind of make people uncomfortable sometimes. But I think part of, being a leader is telling people like it is, and being
people don't like that.
Understanding of they hate it. It really makes people uncomfortable because nobody wants to be told they're soft. But it's like there's a lot of people who are soft, and sometimes you need to be told you're soft. And,
I just saw. It just reminds me. I just saw a clip of Goggins on Rogan. It was like, someone might call you fat. And that might be mean, but you might be fucking fat. Someone might call you dumb.
But you're fat.
That might not be nice, but you might be a fucking dumbass.
I mean, self-awareness, right? You're like, hell, that goes into championship leadership. I am painfully aware of my, the things that I lack. I'm not a good singer. Put me on a football field, but do not put me on a basketball court. Like, there's just certain things I know I'm not good at. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think if you're fat, acknowledge that you're fat, and then decide. You know, it's funny. My dad, both my parents smoked when I was younger. You know, like everybody else in that generation. You know, didn't realize how bad it was for you. Fast forward to today. You know, they both. You know, my dad passed away from lung cancer. My mom just had surgery to correct lung cancer. Crazy. But, you know, my dad used to always say something I always respected. When I was a kid, I just browbeat my mother into quitting smoking. She quit, you know, 30 years ago. And I was just like, you know, I was always on her all the time. Like, Mom, please quit. Finally, like, quit. You know, her son's asking her to quit smoking. So she quits, you know, awesome. And I remember my dad, like, telling me, like, listen, like, relax. Like, I know it's bad for me. I'll quit when I want, but I accept the consequences. And I remember him telling me this when I was probably like, you know, maybe a freshman in high school. And I remember always thinking, like, you know what? I can live with that. I respect that. Like, you know, you're not, what irks me are the people with just all the excuses. Like, oh, I just, you know, I can't lose this weight. Like, no, you don't want to lose the weight. Like, maybe 5% of the population actually has some genetic defect or something that hurts in their ability to be able to lose the weight. The rest of you are just fucking lazy. Like, let's be dead on that. And so I like that he was like, look, I'm not going to make excuses like I can't quit, nicotine's addictive, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, I can quit if I want to. I don't want to. I'm choosing to do this, even though it's a vice. And I own that, and I accept the consequences. And he paid the ultimate consequence.
Yeah, right.
But he never complained about it. He never was boo-hoo. When he was going through chemo, he's like, I did this to myself. And you know what? If I go back in time, I'd probably not smoke. But I did what I did, and now I got to pay the price. And so, you know, I always was like, all right, if you're gonna be fat, if you're gonna be dumb, own that shit.
Yeah, right, absolutely. Well, I feel like we haven't even got to you. So tell us a little bit about your background for the listeners who've been listening now for probably 15 minutes.
I hopefully I give people hope, because I think I spent a career collecting jobs I'm probably not qualified for. So don't let, like, you know, if anybody listening, like, if you want to be something or do something, you know, it's possible. You know, so did the military thing for a while. So senior year at West Point was 9/11. So most of my time was spent deployed. Got out in 2008 of stop loss. Got out in 2008, and then ended up going back to Macombs here at UT for my MBA. And kind of, you know, I think when I got out, and I'm sure, you know, some people, you know, you probably felt this a little bit too. Like, you know, it's like, how does my skill sets translate to the private, you know, private sector? You know, I think the U.S. Army and the U.S. Armed Forces doesn't do an amazing job at transition. They say they do, and they try where they can. But again, it's kind of a cultural thing, because if you read like Startup Nation and think about like what the role of service, what role that plays in Israel, and what role that plays in their entrepreneurial ecosystem and innovation, it's infused throughout everything that Israel is, like their idea of service, and like, you know, that it's a point of pride, and everyone does it, and it's camaraderie, and it's, you know, yes, you're a, you know, high profile banker, but you also served. And like here, when I was getting out, I was like, shit, man, like, what am I supposed to do? You know, and all my friends are out doing deals on Wall Street. Like, you know, what value do I have? And I think nothing could be further from the truth, especially for people serving, you know, over the last, you know, 20 years. Like, it's just a different army. There's a different military. There's so much complexity. You know, we had never trained for the roles. You know, I know you were in Iraq as well. Like, you know, we had never trained for those roles. And so you kind of had to be entrepreneurial. You kind of had to make it up as you go. Like, leadership was pushed down to the smaller unit level because you weren't doing force on force across, you know, NTC or JRTC or whatever the hell we were trained to do. You had to make it up in these urban situations. And, you know, one day you're a trigger puller, and the next day you're, you know, handing out candy. And so it was very kind of, you know, what can you do in an asymmetric situation or an ambiguous situation to both lead and serve at the same time. And so, you know, I think I started beginning to realize how much of that actually does translate, you know, to the private sector, you know, organizational leadership, camaraderie, discipline. And so, but I was going to use my MBA to kind of hopefully polish up on some of the other skills. But I think that sense of not having a specific skill set motivated me. And I was like, all right, you know, if I feel like I'm behind, I got to catch up. And so I hit the ground running. So the minute I got out, I started networking across all of Austin. I made a list of 100 people that, I wanted to meet, set out to meet them. Probably 50 of them never responded. 20 of them, kicked the can down the curb, but 30 of them, were able to, usually get something together. And so started just meeting people, and ended up meeting a few people who were kind of dialed into the angel investment community here and the kind of the early stage venture capital community. I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And so kind of figured, well, know your enemy. Let's figure out the whole VC game before I'm an entrepreneur. So I kind of know what to expect. And then just fell in love with it. I had an early mentor in Admiral Inman. He's an early investor in Dell and Oracle, previously deputy director of the CIA, worked under the Clinton administration, and kind of just said, hey, look, I want to be a fly on the wall. Let me help out. I led with value. I was like, if you let me into the meetings, I will find ways to add value. I'm not asking to be paid. I'm not asking to do anything. I just want a chance to kind of see how this all works. And that ended up working out pretty well. Ended up taking over a local angel network here in Austin that had just gotten started, the Central Texas Angel Network. I grew that to be the most active angel network in the country in a few years. Did my MBA at McCombs. I did a Kaufman Fellowship out of Silicon Valley for 2 years, and then started my own fund focused on healthcare, and did that for about a decade. So we invested in seed, Series A, Series B, early stage healthcare, where we were applying technology. Now, that was me also being self-aware. Lord knows I didn't know that much about medicine, shocker. But I knew how to leverage technology to make inherently inefficient systems more efficient. And I love that. And so spent a decade doing that. And then, ironically, and it's always funny how life works out. So when I was an angel, I helped start Phunware back in 2009 with the first seed round. Fast forward to about 2016, 2017, the founder and I, who's also an Army veteran, were riffing on kind of the rise of blockchain and how that might impact Phunware. I decided to put about $3 million into Phunware for the last private round. And then we went public about a year after that. And so the old CEO needed to step away for some health reasons. CEO said, hey, you're tired of being a VC. You want to, get back and actually do something, one team, one fight, help build this thing with me. And I think it would have taken like a special company for me to want to do that. And I think Phunware is that. We're doing something, really, really cool. We built the first NFL app. We built the first NASCAR app. We did all of Fox's mobile application portfolio. And then now we're basically licensing mobile software to drive what's called digital transformation. So like, anytime you use like your phone to unlock your hotel room, or anytime you use your phone to like get on the plane, like QR codes, like turning your phone into a mobile concierge, that's digital transformation. And so we do it for hospitals, stadiums, hotels. We just launched at Atlantis down in the Bahamas. We're doing like complex workplaces. And so really high level, like Fortune 500, like enterprise mobile applications. That's our jam.
Okay. That's awesome. I love it. Is Tim Ferriss, is he in Austin?
Yeah, he's in Austin. Yeah.
So because he was
here before it was cool,
right? Have you crossed paths with him?
Yeah. He's a great, he was kind of probably one of the obviously there's a lot, we got Dell and a bunch of other people, but like of the new generation, kind of before like, Elon and before Joe Rogan, I think Tim was the guy. Like he was the one that kind of saw Austin first. And so I know we were talking about this. It's really cool to see Austin coming into its own, because when I was investing, people would always ask like, hey, when's Austin going to become like Silicon Valley? And I used to tell them never. Silicon Valley had this, it came out of the gold rush. I mean, it was even the gold rush mentality. You had this, money going after these just big swings for the fences. And then you had this reseeding effect, so out of eBay, out of PayPal, out of Facebook, out of Apple, out of HP, all these other executives would kind of spawn off, and then they would start companies. And I mean, how do you replicate or compete with that? It's just the people are what matters, not the money, and the money will go where the people will go. And so fast forward to today, the pandemic, accelerated, Texas and Florida, but, Austin and Miami specifically, those two ecosystems have been forever changed. And we've just seen an influx of not only capital, big shot, VCs, like 8VC with Joe Lonsdale, Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, Joe Rogan, a lot of folks coming over here. But Tim Ferriss was one of the first kind of bigger shots that were here before of the new generation. So he's great.
Yeah. What's as we shift gears a little bit here, who are some championship leaders that have impacted you and really like more so what are some of the characteristics of them, you know, coaches, mentors, people that have really impacted you? What are some of the characteristics that really stand out to you?
You know, General McCaffrey won for sure. Probably the one, you know, I'll say this first and I'll answer it, you know, back, you know, to General McCaffrey. I think I shot myself in the foot. And so when I was investing, I used to have this, you know, amazing professional coach. I know we talked about coaching before, but I always felt like an entrepreneurial journey can be very lonely because, like, who do you talk to? You don't want to talk to your peers because, like, you don't want them to think you're failing. You don't want to talk to your investors if you took money because you really don't want them to think you're failing. You don't want to talk to the wife or the husband because you don't want them to think you're failing because you know you've leveraged the house and remortgaged everything and got 2 credit cards maxed out. So it's like you kind of put on these airs where you're like, yeah, it's great, you know, and like, you know, inside you're dying because you're just like, you don't know if you're going to make payroll, you know. So I always thought it was nice to have a third party to talk to, you know, and because a really good coach is, you know, one part professional coach, one part personal coach, one part priest, one part counselor, one part therapist, and then, you know, one part just a sounding board, right? And so I had every one of my entrepreneurs I invested in, you know, have this amazing coach locally, Renee Rogers, who's just world class. And one time, you know, I was like, well, I got to, you know, leaders, you know, got to go through it too, right? You know, you got to, you know, practice what you preach. And so I was talking to her one time, and I was kind of giving her this, you know, riff on. I think when I was getting out of college, I really, you know, I was fascinated with the whole like Wall Street like movie, like not the movie or the criminality of it all, but like that mentor-mentee relationship where it's like, I'm going to take you under my wing. I'm going to teach you how it's really done. And, you know, we're going to be successful together, but I'm going to watch you grow. And I was always like, God, that would be awesome to have like that kind of like master of the universe tell you what to do, hopefully keep you out of jail. But, you know, like at least like tell you how the game was played. And I've never really had it. And it was funny. She said to me one day, she's like, most people look at like a mentor-mentee relationship like the mentor is supposed to do exactly what I said, bring you, you know, pull them under your wing and teach you the ropes. And it's like, it's a two-way street, you know, and you have to be vulnerable enough for a mentor to think you need mentoring, but you have to be open enough to be able to be mentored. Yes. And you have to have at least enough, you know, kind of courage to actually ask to be mentored. Yeah. So, you know, and she was like, you've never done that. Like you kind of, you know, if somebody's looking at you, they're going to think, oh, he's got it. He's good. Like I have no role here. And it's like, so the more you put on those airs of I've got it, the more a mentor is going to move on to somebody else where they can actually be of value, be of use. And so you got to kind of, you know, part of networking, you know, it can be a little smaller subsegment of, let me, you know, network for a mentor and let me kind of build that mentoring relationship and actually put some real good insight and forethought into it because it can be wildly rewarding. Now, I don't, you know, so I've had some really good advisors along the way. I don't know that they would be mentors, but I wish I would have taken more time to kind of know then what I know now about making them a mentor, but they've had, you know, impacts on me. So like, you know, General McCaffrey, I remember one of the things that he said, and actually Admiral Inman, who's here locally, also said to me one time, and it was all about like delegation, and it was you know, what they were both trying to say in different ways, you know, almost 10 years apart, was this idea of just because you can get an A at something doesn't mean you shouldn't allow someone else to get a B- at it, because it frees you up to go do something where you can get an A+, and maybe that activity has, you know, a higher coefficient. It's just more valuable than the whole. And like, you know, wrapping your brain around that as like a type A personality is like really, really hard because like, you know, understanding, you could do it, but you shouldn't do it. Right. Or if you let one of your team members do something, they might not do it the way you would do it, or they might not even do it as good as you, but that's okay. And you don't want to necessarily make them feel like they failed because they didn't do it as good as you. You also got to support them and coach them and teach them and let them learn. So like, you know, they both were telling me the art of delegation is probably one of the greatest skills a leader can develop. And it's like walking a fine line of understanding how to resource and delegate, but also train and support, but also not fail either. And so you want to give people enough room to grow, but you got to know, when do you step in? When do you step back? When do you let them fail? And I mean, you got kids. I had my first on the way. I assume it's kind of like parenting. It's like you don't want to teach them everything, because you want to like let them learn on their own, but you also don't want to see them struggle or fail. So you're like, I'm sure it's I mean, what have you been seeing? I mean, it's from military to parenting, kind of, does that resonate with you?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, 100%, because I was thinking, that's one of the biggest things that I think holds business owners back from really, really being able to grow, right? They get in their own way. And then you take them out of their business for a week, which is almost impossible to do. But when you get them to do that, then they go back and they realize that their team thrived and that they've just been in the way the whole time, right? So same thing with parenting. I hadn't put too much thought into it, but yeah, I mean, if because you love your kid and you want to protect them and you want to be there for them, you want to support them, and you want to like just make sure they make all the right decisions. But in the end, it's like, no, you're just stunting their growth.
Yeah.
Doing that. Like you gotta allow them to learn on their own, to choose what it is that they really want to get into without forcing in like your interests on them, right? Like, I want them to play football or do all the things that I did, right? Or be the athlete. And like not all my kids necessarily want to do that. So it's like, all right, I gotta
and that's okay.
And just let them take their own interest, become their own person, really, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard. Yeah, it's tough, but you do the best you can, right? So
that's it. I think you do, and I think other people can. The only other thing I would say about mentorship is like, so obviously, Jeremy McCaffrey and Adeline are two very well-known people. But mentors don't have to be. You don't have to have Elon Musk as your mentor. Right. I think that there are really great ways to learn all around us, and so I really encourage everyone to kind of have like a kitchen cabinet of people and who they can kind of go to in different functional areas, right? Someone who's really dialed into finance, someone who's really dialed into maybe business, somebody who's really dialed into something else, they're a poet, I don't know, it's just be well-rounded. And I got to find this book. Somebody else had shared it with me a long time ago, but it was kind of this. People always think that if you want to do something for somebody, like that's going to somehow make them like you. And actually, like from a psychological perspective, asking something of somebody else actually creates a stronger relationship, because it feeds on somebody else's desire to somewhat give. But it's also, I mean, ego is not necessarily a bad word. It's like, oh, you need my help? Cool. Like, I can help you. And so like, if you find those opportunities to just put yourself out there and say, hey, can you help me think through this part of my business or this part of my career progression, or hey, I value what you did over here, can I pick your brain for 30 minutes? That actually builds a stronger relationship, because you're telling somebody else, I value you. And, I really would love your help. And that gasses people up. It's nice when people when you feel wanted and you feel like you can add some value to somebody else's life. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. What's a moment for you? Kind of a critical moment, I guess I would say, like that fork in the road moment where you chose the way you did, which is got you where you are today, but had you chose different, would have you somewhere else very differently. I think we have a lot of these moments in life, but I think there's a number of them that really stick out, and they're powerful to hear for others that maybe are in that situation right now. Is there a moment or two that come to mind for you?
That's a great question. I'm gonna have to steal that. There's probably two, and they're probably the same, right? So part of what we talked about with like leadership is that kind of consistency of action. I was probably, so it was the mid 90s. Rumsfeld was downsizing the army. I had no, did not come. My dad had served in the Navy. My grandfather had served in the Navy, but it wasn't like a military family. And so I was already accepted to UT. I had a lot of fun in high school. I was going to have a lot of fun in college. I had no desire to be in the military whatsoever. And arguably the 90s were like the golden era. And so, there was not like this call to arms. And so one of my good friends at the time, his dad had gone to West Point. So he was always going to go to West Point. And I mean, he's like, you should come with me. I'm like, you got to be in the Army, right? He's like, yeah. I was like, no. I was like, no, thank you. And at that point I wasn't like, too introspective. And so I was like, all right, why should we go? And, you see pictures of it, and it is a beautiful campus. And then the way he got me was like, look, you don't have to pay for school. And like, I didn't come from, means, and I didn't want my parents were going to try to, help me pay for UT. And I was like, well, it would be a cool way to let them just take the money they had saved and spend it on themselves. So I did like that. And then he was like, look, people are getting paid like $100,000 just to get out of the military. Like Rumsfeld's downsizing everything. So normally you serve 5 years after your graduation. But like people are getting out after like 2 years and with $100,000 check just to get out of the military and give up their commitment. I'm like, okay, now we're talking. Like, hey, it's a prestigious academy. I don't have to pay for college. I probably won't have to serve. All right, let's do it. And so I started looking into it, but then I was kind of going through this, to your point of your question, is like this existential, like, I think what was really happening was it was the first instance, obviously we had like Texas two-a-days and those sucked, but like, it's kind of like, you're just on inertia. If you're a kid in Texas, you play football and it's, two-a-days suck. This was one of those first things where it was kind of by myself. Like no one would judge me if I didn't apply to West Point. Like no one would judge me if I didn't go to West Point. Like it was just like this, I was alone with myself thinking about like, why would I not try? Do I think I can't get in?
Yeah.
And it was like, all right, you know what? I can probably scratch 2 itches here. I'm probably not going to get in, but if I don't try, I'll always wonder what if, because, people don't know this. There's only 2 real pains in this world. There's the pain of discipline and the pain of regret. And I always thought from a young age, I hate the idea of regret. So let's apply some discipline. So I'll apply. I won't get in. Sure shit, I got in, and I was like, oh man, I was like, now it was a real existential crisis where I'm like, all right, now this is serious. Like, do I go? And I was like, but I can't like admit that like I can't hack it. So I'm like, you know what? Let's do it. And so like it was those moments of, what you do when no one's looking. And I think every leader has those where it's like no one's going to be the wiser, but I'll know. And my soul will know, my energy will know, whatever. And so making that decision to go obviously changed my life because, it was our senior year when 9/11 happened. And I still remember going into my first class and it was this like cartoonish colonel and he's kind of square jaw, gravelly voice. And we sat down and he's kind of looking at everybody and everybody's still like reeling. And we had actually got put on alert at West Point because they thought another plane was going to strike West Point. And he looks at us and he's like, well, cadets, you're all going to war. And I was like, fuck me. I was like, this is getting out early. I remember calling my friend. I was like, I don't think we're getting out early, buddy. He's like, no, we're not getting out early. I'm like, yeah. So anyway, that was the first one. And then I went through a version of this again when I got out of the Army, went to McCombs. There was this like pitch party, and this will sound stupid in comparison, but it's actually the exact same thing. I think leaders will always face this. So it was before classes started. We were starting in August. Microsoft was putting on this pitch competition. I only wanted to go there because it was a group called Venture Fellows that I wanted to be a part of. And they said that some of them were going to be there. So I was like, all right, I'll go there and kind of network with them. We go in, and if you're there as a visitor, you basically have to come up with an idea on the spot and pitch everybody for monopoly money. And like I am, like we talked about in the beginning of this, like I'm not like, I don't fancy myself a salesperson. I don't fancy myself, like that's not my jam. But like I'll do it if I have to, and I'm comfortable with people and I can talk. And so I walk in and like I start getting the lay of the land, and it's packed with alumni and teachers and students. I mean, there's probably 1,000 people in this alumni center. And I was like, they're like, you got to have what's your idea? Here's some money. They're processing everybody. I'm like, oh hell no! I left. I turned around. I went all the way back, like about 4 blocks to the parking garage. I'm sitting in my car, and I'm like, dude, you cannot be this much of a pussy. Like, you
Yeah.
cannot be a quitter. Like, come on. Like, what are you doing? And I literally just gassing myself up in the car. I was like, all right, fuck this. I was like, all right, come on. I stormed back in there, and I kid you not, I went in and I won it. And so I won like $5,000
What was
from
your pitch?
Microsoft. It was stupid, and it was like, this is a long ass time ago, but it was. I knew I needed something that someone could get very fast. I heard some kid pitching some like data storage thing. I was like, no one's gonna get that. So I wanted like a product and something that somebody would get, and it's Texas. And so, because it was really just a pitch, it really wasn't the idea, but it was basically solar shades. So this was, I'm old, so it was before a lot of like the mobile craze. This was 2008. And so it was basically, everybody in Texas has shades that they put in their visor, in their car, so it doesn't jack up the dashboard because the Texas sun is crazy. And it was basically just solar shades with a little USB port on there, so you can just kind of charge your phone. Again, kids listening, this was before your actual car could charge all your shit.
Exactly.
This was a long time ago. So back then it made sense. But it was basically a big, windshield visor that would also charge, keep a charge and then charge all your stuff. And it had like a little portable compartment that you could take off and put in your backpack. So while your car is sitting there, you're creating kind of battery powered storage. Then you like rip it off and then take that battery with you wherever you want to go, and it could charge up your laptop or your phone or whatever. Now, again, this is back when I used to carry a separate battery. Again, kids, you used to be able to remove the battery from your phone, and I could keep extra batteries on me, and I never ran out of charge. But obviously, the manufacturers of the phones got smart and realized that they just lock the battery inside the phone. They can make you buy new phones and buy new chargers.
Yeah. I love it. That's great.
So just doing it, putting yourself out there and putting yourself in the game. Anytime you find yourself hesitating, that's probably a good sense that, there's at least materiality to what you're considering. And so, I've always had kind of in the back of my mind this quote that, God put the best things in your life on the other side of pure fear or pure terror. And sometimes you just got to go through it and to get to where you want to go. So I'm glad I did it.
Yeah. I mean, what you said, when people are in that moment, what's going on, right? They either will, tend to choose the safe route, or others are pressuring them to choose the safe route, not because they're trying to hurt them, but because they like care about them and want to protect them.
Exactly.
Right? But either discipline or regret, right? And the outcome is never guaranteed, but you're definitely not going to hit it if you don't choose to go that route. So
100%
what you're saying. I love it. Yeah, absolutely. We start to wrap this up. If there's one or two things that you could give to the listeners outside of what we've already talked about today, if they were to implement right away and it would help move their life forward, what would those be?
Yeah, I'd say, it sounds, hokey, but one thing I've struggled with is just being present. I think, you get in this routine and it starts at an early age. It's like, if I can just get to high school, all right, if I can just get to college, if I can just get out of the house, I can be on my own, I can be independent. Okay, well, if I can just graduate, all right, I just got to get my first job. All right, I can make my first $1 million. Okay, it's always like one more thing. And it's like, before you know it, you've lived a long time and you've just been rushing from one thing to the next. If you can figure out how to like romanticize the little stuff, I guarantee you you'll be happier. Be really jazzed about waking up and making lunch, for your kids, that cup of coffee while you kind of, read a book or read the paper or draw or do whatever it is you do, walking your dog. Like, the little moments are just as impactful. And there's more of them. And so don't spend your entire year waiting for that summer vacation where you're going to go to the Bahamas. Like, there's a lot of life to be lived along the way, and you got to take stock of that, and you got to be present. I think along the way, the other one is be kind. My mom always said, if you had a choice between being right and being kind, be kind. I think she meant it a certain way, but like, I think I've taken it, one step further. Like, it's just like there's always these opportunities where you really can just like destroy somebody or go, I can't tell you how many times I write an email and then like just delete it, or like I go to like respond to something on Twitter and I'm like, you know what, just delete it. Like I'm only doing it for my own ego. Like learning to like just stop. Like what is the point of what the action you're about to take? Like, do you really need to do that? And more often than not, it's not even in business settings. It's a lot of times it's with your relationships. Do I really need to just like throw this jab at my wife or my husband? Do I really need to just kind of like, you really don't. Like, just like, oh, hey, trash still hadn't been taken out, huh? It's like, just take it out. If it's important to you, take it out. Like, why keep like, tearing people down? And so, being present, romanticizing those little moments, but also just being kind to those around you. Everyone has their own journey. No one wakes up and is like, you know what? I'm going to really piss off Nate today. Yep.
Yeah, right.
I'm going to get under his skin. It's like, no, it's just the little things they do might annoy us, but it wasn't their intention. Everyone's doing the best they can, and you don't know what other people's journeys they're on or what they're facing. And so, always keep that in mind before you respond. Again, pain and discipline of being kind and watching what you say to others, or the pain of regret and really just losing a lot of respect that people might have for you, losing relationships, losing opportunities to add value. If you just ask, hey man, like when someone pisses you off, rather than being like, hey, you pissed me off for this, like, hey, what's going on? Like, you seem a little down today, or maybe, a little like, not on your game. Like, what's happening? Oh, my dog just died. Oh, shit. Like, thank God I didn't just rip you a new asshole for this. I mean, it's like, be present and have the wherewithal to be kind.
Yeah, I love it. That's perfect. I know you're not a big self-promoter, but are you even on social media?
I am. I'm learning. So Dan Fleischman's out there. I'm doing my best. I'm learning. So I'm actually pretty easy to find. Instagram is at Randall Crowder. Twitter is Crowder Official. I have at Randall Crowder, but I can't remember my password. So, maybe one day I'll figure it out. But for right now, it's just Crowder Official. LinkedIn is Randall Crowder, Facebook, same. And then just, Phunware, check us out, phunware.com. It's with a PH, publicly traded on NASDAQ, ticker symbol is PHUN. We also have some stuff we're doing around blockchain, so you can download Phun Wallet on iOS and Android. You can go to PhunToken.com. We have our own utility token. We're the first publicly traded company to do it. We're also the first publicly traded company to have a security token. So we have PhunCoin as well. So a lot of cool stuff we're doing. But you can go to Phunware.com, check it out, dig around and see what else, kind of all the things we're up to. Hit me up, reach out. If I can be helpful, let me know.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate it. It's been a fun conversations. The time's gone by quick. So thank you.
Absolutely. I'm sure we could talk forever, but I really appreciate, your time. I appreciate you curating, this content and this audience. So thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.